Zealand. And the prisoners that were sent to that camp, well, it was their job to clear that bush and scrub out of the way and prepare the land for the planting of trees. In fact, most of the forests that you folks see between Rotorua and Tapu, including this one in front of you, were originally started using prison labour. And it was a gang of those prisoners that actually came across this clearing. But again, what they saw 100 or so years ago is not what you're seeing now. At that time, in this rock formation, all that was here was a beautiful clear hot water spring with a little ledge about so high around it. You get a pretty good idea of what she would have looked like then, but on a much smaller scale, if you look across at that rock formation over there. If you look very carefully, just on the bush line, you'll see a scrubby looking plant, literally growing out of the rock. Now that's Manuka, or New Zealand tea tree, and round its base there's another little ledge which marks the edge of what was then another hot spring. Now 100 years ago, prison life in New Zealand was pretty primitive. Those prisoners were over half a day's bumpy ride by horse from Rotorua. They didn't have access to any of the luxuries of life, and they certainly didn't have access to constant hot water. And some of them thought it'd be a rather clever idea to bring the camp's dirty washing down to this large hot water spring that they had found here. That would save them the bother of gathering firewood to boil water. So one morning, a group of them were down here, busy dipping their dirty clothes into this hot water spring. They pulled them out, scrubbed them up with some soap, dipped them back in to rinse them off, and got one heck of a fright. What actually happened was, this hot spring erupted. Their washing disappeared that way, and they disappeared that way. And we now know that what that soap did was to set off a chain reaction. It took the tension off the colder water, which is at the very top of the natural reservoir below the geyser itself. That then allowed the superheated steam and water from further down to force its way up through those cooler levels and out through the top in an eruption. And that's what we're going to do this morning. But instead of using soap, we now use a product called surfactant, which has been chemically engineered to do exactly the same thing, but to leave nothing behind in the environment. And once I put it into the vent of the geyser, if all goes to plan, in just a few moments, we should see some bubbles forming at the top of the vent here. As that hot water comes through, all this will be pushed out, and we'll see the water start to surge as she builds up into that first full eruption. Okay, to get from something that looked like that to this, what actually happened was those same prisoners piled rocks around the edge and tried to make a chimney. And the reason for doing that was for their own entertainment. In those days, they didn't have TVs, videos, or any of that sort of gear. They had to make their own fun. By building that chimney, it forced the water into a narrower opening. That created a stronger jet of water and set their clothes even higher. But then Mother Nature came along, and she actually gave her this cone shape and the white mantle that you are seeing now, and she's still doing it using a mineral called silica. Now that's in the geyser water, so each time there's an eruption, water shoots up into the air, falls over this area where it's the wind and the sun that evaporates the water and leaves behind that mineral, which has given her this shape and this colouring. The geyser is named after Lady Constance Knox. Now, quite honestly, in New Zealand history, she wasn't too important, but her father was. He was a gentleman called Lord Ranfurly, and in May of 1903, he was out here with his family to mark the occasion of that visit. His daughter christened the geyser. Her name was Lady Knox, and that's how we got the association. Quick bit of geology about her. She's about 150 years old. The reservoir below the geyser, part of which runs underneath, 1,000 litres of water. She can play for up to an hour, and she can hit heights of between 10 and 20 metres. How high she does go, though, is totally dependent on the amount of water in that reservoir below her. So take your photos as she builds, because there's no guarantee she's going to hit that height again. And just quickly, the word geyser comes to us from, it means to gush forth. Down here, we do not call these geysers. A geyser, good elderly gentleman. Enjoy your day.
Giờ đâu?